Welcome to the Chairman's Perspective podcast.
Welcome to the Chairman's Perspective. I'm your host, Mark Billingsley, Chairman of the Shelby County Board of Commissioners. My hope is that the Chairman's Perspective provides useful information about your Shelby County government and those organizations and people that make a difference. On today's show, we have Shelby County Sheriff Floyd Bonner Jr. You won't want to miss any part of this show. We'll be right back on the Chairman's Perspective, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
The KUDZUKIAN Network presents Cities Now with Carol Coletta.
I'm Carol Coletta, host of Cities Now, a brand new show hosted here on the KUDZUKIAN Network. With Cities Now, we want to help listeners make smart decisions for their cities.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Little by little, the city is rebuilding itself with businesses such as urban farms and breweries.
We'll interview the sharpest people on the thorniest issues facing cities now.
Cities Now, part of the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Today it is my real personal privilege to welcome to the show the 47th Sheriff of Shelby County, Floyd Bonner. Floyd, I consider you a dear friend. You've been an amazing public servant. I know I'm not sure if you want me to share this with everybody, but this is actually your 40th year in law enforcement. Yes. You became the 47th Sheriff of Shelby County, but you're also the very first African-American Sheriff for Shelby County.
Yes.
So truly, what a privilege to be with you today. You're homegrown. You're from this community. Where'd you go to school? Share with the audience a little bit of your background.
Well, first of all, Commissioner or Chairman, let me thank you for having me on with your show here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've grown up here in Memphis. Was born in Orange Mound.
Wow.
Parents eventually moved to Westwood. I graduated from Hillcrest High School and went on to college and eventually graduated from the University of Memphis as we know it now. And I just love our community. I never considered leaving, never considered going anywhere else, and plan on staying here.
Well, you ran a dynamic campaign, and it was amazing, quite frankly, to see the bipartisan support for you.
Yes.
Being a law enforcement officer, the time you've put in, honestly, your connection with the community. I thought it was interesting during your campaign, you really brought so many different people in, but also you reached out to the faith community.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about why the interest in the faith community, and how does the faith community help you in your job?
Well, it was interesting. When we got started campaigning, we started talking to ministers. As you know, ministers have large congregations, sure, and they do have influence over their congregations. But just to get an opportunity to go out and speak to the congregations, let them know who you were, what your qualifications were. I think when I started campaigning, one of the things that we talked about, even with the bipartisan thing, is that in the 30 or 40 years of law enforcement now, the people that I've taken to jail, I've never asked them what party they were affiliated with. So being in law enforcement didn't have anything to do. So what we tried to do is get our message out there that we were the best qualified candidate. We were already doing the job and wanted to continue to serve this great community.
Well, you're doing it. Law enforcement is in your DNA. I've had the great privilege of meeting your father. Can you share with the audience when I say law enforcement's in your DNA, what does that mean?
Well, my dad, who's still alive, 85 years old, has a birthday coming up in February.
What a blessing.
He was a Memphis Police Department officer, and I remember him being in robbery, patrol division, all the various divisions. Then eventually, I think in 1978, he left the Memphis Police Department. He came to the Sheriff's Office when Gene Barksdale won the sheriff election. And he came over as the administrative assistant, kind of involved with community affairs. So I think that's kind of where I kind of got my first taste of serving the community, because I was a little young kid at the time.
Right.
And Dad would always take me around and introduce me to people. And it was just a very humbling experience, because my mother and father, we grew up in a household where helping people was just job one. My mom and dad, they fed families that were hungry, and we saw this. And I have a sister and two brothers, so we saw this, every day.
Right.
So this was just, I guess, as you say, in my DNA.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, you're listening to the Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm honored to have Sheriff Floyd Bonner with me today. Sheriff, talk about Floyd Bonner Sr., your father, and now you're the first African-American sheriff in Shelby County. When your father was on the Memphis Police Department, it was a different day in Memphis.
Oh, yeah.
How was that different? You've shared with me, and I've spoken with your dad about being an African-American at the time and being a patrol officer. It was a different day. He didn't even walk into the station, I think, to get his car keys.
Right.
Can you just share a little bit about that and what you feel your role is as the first African-American sheriff of Shelby County?
Well, so many things have changed, Mr. Chairman. I can remember when my dad was on the police department, and we only had one car. So when my dad would work midnight shift, my mother would load all four of us up along with him and take him to the Mack truck stop, or the truck sales place there at it's Crump and Danny Thomas. And I can remember Dad getting out of the car in his uniform, and white officers would bring him a squad car and stuff. Wow. So I asked him one day, I said, Dad, you can't be a police officer. I never see you going to the police station. And so he told us the story that, that black officers weren't allowed at the precincts, that they had to be, cars had to be brought to them for them to go to work. So he rode in the downtown district, and I can remember him telling me before he ever arrested a white citizen that he had to be called, or field commander or sergeant had to be called to be asked permission to do it. So it was predominantly African American in that area that he rode in. So, you kind of fast forward to where we are now. Memphis has made great strides, and we're certainly not without our woes, if you will. But I think that we've made great strides, and I know election night, my dad was so proud because he had ran for sheriff in Fayette County years ago when he moved to Fayette County, and he didn't win. And so to see his oldest son, his namesake, if you will, to win this election, he was so proud. A lot of tears that night, and I'm very proud of him. Let me say that, because he is the foundation of what I am today. So I hold the utmost respect for him, and love him to death, and just still happy that he's still here to see all of this.
Well, I just had to share that. We've only got about a minute left in this segment, but Sheriff Bonner, do you see other law enforcement children, young men, young women, following their parents into law enforcement? You have a powerful story of how you watched Floyd Bonner Sr., and then you go on to become the sheriff of Shelby County. Do we see families doing that generationally anymore?
Well, just a little bit, Chairman. Some of our deputies, some of their children are becoming law enforcement officers. My sons actually took a different path. They took different paths. Sure. They both live out of town right now, and I'm okay with that. But we do. When you have a good employee, a lot of times our old saying is, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Sure. So when you have that good employee, and then their child wants to get into this business, a lot of times we readily hire them because they must be qualified naturally, but you think that you're going to get a pretty good officer in that child, because you hope that parent, you believe that parent has done all the right things to get them ready.
We're going to take a 30-second break, and we're going to be right back with more on the Chairman's Perspective.
The Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Hey, I'm Williams Brack, co-host of Grind Set. The insight you gain from us and our guests will motivate you to take the leap into entrepreneurship. Make sure to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast provider.
Grind Set on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN!
I'm Mark Billingsley, host of the Chairman's Perspective and the current chairman of your Shelby County Board of Commissioners. And in the studio today, we have Floyd Bonner with us. He is the Sheriff of Shelby County, Tennessee. Sheriff Bonner, again, great to be with you today. You spent truly a lifetime being a law enforcement leader. What do you see today in 2020 as our biggest threat to public safety?
Wow, that's a great question, Commissioner. I think juvenile crime is what we're seeing now, the uptick in juvenile crime. It's very disturbing for me. I'm sure for your listening audience, the things that we're trying to do now. And let me say this, there are a lot of great nonprofits and a lot of great people that are doing great things with our kids now. But our kids are different than they were when I was growing up, when you were growing up. These kids now have to have things to do, places to work, things to keep them away from the streets, if you will. I think the challenge in 2020 will be to try to curb this juvenile crime. Right now, unfortunately, I have approximately about 44 juveniles out at jail lease that are going to be tried as adults, and that number has gone up from about 23 or 24 at the beginning of 2019. So as you can see, even though overall crime is down, our juveniles are getting more and more active, more part of this vicious cycle of crime, if you will. So our challenge as leaders in the community will be to find things for them to do and try to steer them down a different path.
I know this past year, you're talking about juvenile crime. This past year, the amount of auto burglary break-ins by juveniles was honestly just absolutely out of the chart. Right. And then also we've got, I'm not trying to throw stones, but we've got a legislative system that tends to want to put more and more guns in the hands of citizens. I think back in 2014, the legislature passed where you can put a handgun in any car without a permit.
Right.
And then immediately after that, we saw a huge uptick of stolen guns on the streets. How many of those cars getting broken into are by juveniles, and what do you do to combat the amount of guns that they're taking out of these vehicles?
Well, I don't have the specific numbers with me today, but let me say this. And I go out and I speak to neighborhood groups all the time. And I'm not opposed to citizens carrying weapons.
Sure.
I'm okay with that. However, you need to be a responsible gun owner. If you're going to carry a weapon in your car, the very least you could do for us, the law enforcement community, for your community itself, is to be responsible and take those weapons in the house at night. Yeah. So many times that we see juveniles, what we call work neighborhoods. In other words, they'll go out to a neighborhood. It might be 4 or 5 of them in a car. They drop off on the street. Then they go down the street, pulling on door handles on cars, taking whatever they might anything that they can find. Sure. And unfortunately, a lot of times these are weapons, and there's just additional weapons out on the street, things that police officers have to deal with, sheriff deputies have to deal with. And so if the citizens of Memphis and the state has passed this law, I mean, the very least you could do is be responsible in taking those weapons in the house.
You're listening to the Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm so honored to have Floyd Bonner with us, who is the Sheriff of Shelby County. We've been talking about juvenile crime. I am actually a former reserve police officer, and of course I've chaired the Law Enforcement Committee and work closely with you and Director Rawlings. But patrol officers not only face cars that have a lot of guns in them these days, but also I've also been told that there's a high risk that your officers are going to be exposed to fentanyl, a very, very powerful drug. Tell us about how officers are dealing with that, because my understanding is, Sheriff, you can just even touch fentanyl on your hands and you can ingest that. So how do you deal with that with the amount of fentanyl that's on the streets these days?
Again, another great question, Commissioner. We've talked about it. We've sent bulletins out, if you will, to our officers on how to handle this fentanyl crisis that we're going through. Most of the time, or the times that we have had some exposure, has been the narcotics officers, and they take precautions because a lot of times they know the warrant that they're going on and what they could possibly be exposed to. So they're wearing rubber gloves, and if it's a high amount of fentanyl, they even wear masks, to try to keep that exposure down. But this is just an ongoing crisis all across the country. It's not only in our community here in Shelby County, but it's all across the country.
Yeah.
And I went to the International Chiefs of Police Conference up in Chicago just a few months ago and talked with other chiefs and other law enforcement leaders, and everyone is struggling with this. And because you don't want we've seen K9 officers lose their K9s from them sniffing the fentanyl, and then the overexposure. It just kills an animal, and you, as a department, you might have $10,000 invested in a K9, and then all of a sudden, with a quick sniff, that K9 is gone. So it is definitely a crisis for all of us. And right now, you just have to stay vigilant. You have to be very aware of what's going on and who you're dealing with.
Unfortunately, we're seeing, not only here in Shelby County, but across the country, a high rate of overdoses.
Yes.
I've heard some really good news that since you've put in place the Narcan drug that your officers are carrying, you've been saving lives. And ever since you got that drug, you've literally saved lives.
Yes.
Can you just share, Narcan is basically a drug that reverses an overdose?
Right. Reverses the effects of an overdose. Usually what happens is when a person is too exposed or has too much in his system, his heart will stop, his breathing will stop, and Narcan does reverse those effects. I was looking at a news station here a few months ago, and there's a very large city in the United States where the police chief, if you will, said that he wouldn't allow his officers to carry Narcan.
Wow.
And I just don't understand how we're here to serve and protect.
Right.
And, even though that person may have a problem, serving them, saving their lives, and we see it all the time where our officers have to administer Narcan just to save a life, and so does MPD as well. So Narcan is a great drug to get them back, if you will. Now, naturally, we would love if no one ever overdosed, but as a tool to have for those officers in their toolbox, it's been a great thing for us.
Wow. Hold on, we're going to be back 1 minute. We're going to take a quick break. More with the chairman's perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Jazz, America's own original musical art form. When did it start? Who were and are some of the major players? How do you distinguish what kind of jazz you're listening to? We talk about the great and lesser-known artists, songs and tunes, the instruments, and the social impact jazz has had on world culture since its beginning at the start of the 20th century.
Riffin' on jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN!
We are back on the chairman's perspective, and we're talking with Shelby County Sheriff Floyd Bonner, the 47th Sheriff of Shelby County. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. Sheriff, you've got a lot of challenges as a hiring director, quite frankly. You're going to need more officers in my district.
Right.
We're going to be de-annexing South Cordova, Southwind, and Windike at the beginning of next year on December 31st at midnight of 2020. Your men will start patrolling those areas. Can you talk about the need and the opportunities for a great job with the Shelby County Sheriff's Department? Well,
I hope your listeners are interested, or their children or grandkids. But
right.
Yeah, we're going to be hiring our acts with your commission.
Sure.
In July, will be an additional 50 officers to cover those areas. We'll be hiring, taking applications now. So if you go to our website or the county's website, ShelbyCountySheriff.org, and you can apply now. And we hope to have these officers on board by July, because they go to school for 26 weeks, and then they go through a 3-month field training officer program. So we're trying to get ready for January of 2021 to hire an additional 50. So
I meet your deputies every day. They're amazing men and women.
Yes.
Can you share with the listening audience what the requirements are to be a Shelby County deputy?
Well, right now you have to be naturally be in good physical condition, but a high school education, and just no criminal background. I mean, now that we're pretty strict on,
sure,
because we think is very important. But you have to be able to pass our background check. They do have to pass a physical agility test, running, jumping, push-ups, so on and so forth. But most of the time, if you're in average shape,
sure,
you can make it. It's not that difficult. We will get you in shape by the time you graduate from recruit schools. We have 26 weeks to work on you.
You know, I've seen some of your recruits on the first week,
yeah,
and by the end of the week, I have seen them jump over all kind of hoops and been through. It's amazing to see the entry level officer, and then right when they graduate, it's amazing, and how they progress. And I've also seen your training officers; they do it with great respect. They certainly hold the men and women accountable. But at the end of the day, you really put a lot of really good officers on track. But the problem is you're challenged, and you know I've been a supporter of championing, really thinking outside the box to allow your officers to come from outside of Shelby County.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? I know Director Rawlings is saying the same thing. What are you saying?
Well, and I'm saying the same thing as well. I think we're going to have to open the borders up a little bit here in Shelby County, because as I've said before, Director Rawlings and I are kind of fishing out of the same pond. Some of the municipalities do not have residency requirement, so it makes it difficult for us. Now, I can just tell you this: earlier, back in the fall of last year, we had 2,300 applications. By the time we went through all the background checks, everything that we needed to do a final interview with applicants, we were down to 63.
Wow!
So when you go from 2,300 to 63, you understand that maybe something that we're doing, and our pay is comparable to all the municipalities as well as MPD. So we've got to be able to do some things to try to get those numbers up. Quite frankly, I am in fear that we're not going to be able to hire all the officers that we need by July 1. And so that's why we're shooting for that date. Hopefully, your listening audience, if they know anyone that's interested in the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, we are looking for a few good men and women, and we're hoping that we'll be able to, and that goes into our recruiting process as well. We really revved that up, trying to get our message out there. And if you don't mind, I'd like to plug our app.
Please do. Yeah, that's
Shelby
great.
County Sheriff's app. You can go, and it's a free download at the App Store. And it's everything that you would like to know about the Sheriff's Office. It has great phone numbers to all the divisions. We're rebuilding our website right as we speak, and I think it's coming along as well. I think we'll probably be finished with it by April, but a lot of good information. But that app is just so helpful, and as I said, it's a free download. Yeah.
And you're listening to the Chairman's Perspective on the KUDZUKIAN Network. We're with Sheriff Floyd Bonner. Sheriff, you talked about the need for additional deputies. We've got upcoming de-annexation and big part of the county, so you're going to need over 50 new officers. Also, every time you recruit a class, I always hear of a great number of men and women who've ended their terms of service and are retiring. So if you're interested in a position with the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, I've again just met so many of the men and women that work for your department. They have a great career with the Sheriff's Department. And I've also seen over the years a great number of your men and women move up in the ranks and become managers and leaders. Also, Sheriff, for the regular listening audience, you can become a volunteer with the Sheriff's Department if you want to be a reserve deputy, if you want to look in on senior citizens. If someone's listening and they want to volunteer, how do they get in touch and get involved?
Please call 222-5805, 222-5805. That will get you in touch if you would like to be a reserve officer or emergency service officer, or what we call our volunteer services that go out and check on the seniors. We would love to have you be a part of that, especially reserve officers. Our numbers are dwindling down, and it's a huge commitment for for a person to become a reserve officer. So we understand that, but we're really in desperate need. If you want to serve your community in that capacity, please call that number.
I tell you, as a former reserve police officer, you can maintain your full-time job, but it's one of those opportunities where you can get involved. You certainly get extensive training before getting in a patrol car, but it's a great opportunity for someone who's always been interested in law enforcement, or for somebody who wants to make a contribution, and then for people really interested in maybe a long-term career. I know some of your reserve deputies end up becoming full-time officers.
Yep, we do hire from our reserve division. Unfortunately, we kind of have depleted it from our hiring, but usually when we have a reserve officer that works and does the work, and he shows that, or he or she shows that they're doing a great job for us, and they would like to become regular, we do hire them. And I would also, if I just for a moment, our Citizens Academy, if you would like to know more about the Shelby County Sheriffs Office, please call 222-6099. It gets the average citizen an opportunity to come in and see what we do. We have officers come in from all the various divisions and talk about what your Shelby County Sheriff's Office is all about. They get a chance to interact with all the officers. We try to show them everything, but you can put in an application. We're hoping to start a class, Citizens Academy, at the 1st of April.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So again, 222-6099. I think you'll enjoy it. You get a chance to fire a few firearms and get a chance to really get to know what we do. And all the things. A lot of our citizens say, wow, we didn't know that you guys did all of that.
And all those are area code 901.
Yes, area code 901. I'm sorry. Yeah, area code 901.
Well, Sheriff Bonner, you've provided a wealth of information regarding public safety in our Shelby County Sheriff's Office. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for your great tenure. Thank you for the future that you'll continue to offer up. And I also want to thank the many deputies and staff that work with you. They're outstanding officers. And just thank you for being here today.
Well, Commissioner, I certainly do appreciate it. And we do appreciate your friendship and your support over the years. We've always known we've had friends with the chairman, Billingsley. You've always supported us, and we certainly do appreciate it. It makes our job a lot easier.
Thank you, Sheriff. This is a chairman's perspective. I'll be right back with some closing thoughts.
20 with Tanya, presented by the Commercial Appeal.
20 minutes of the challenges and opportunities, we face in Memphis, but also a lot of the things nationally that concern me and that should concern other people as well.
20 with Tanya.
On the KUDZUKIAN Network.
This was a powerful show today, and I hope this information gave you better understanding of the Shelby County Sheriff's Office and their efforts to keep us safe. Our Shelby County government is working day in and day out to address the challenges of public safety in our community, but we can't do it alone. The Shelby County Sheriff's Office needs your help, resources, and time. Please think about volunteering with the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, and you'll be glad you did. I also want to send a very special thank you to all of our Shelby County employees and elected officials. They are truly some of our county's best public servants. We've had a great show today, and we continue to encourage you to listen to the Chairman's Perspective and the Commission in Action 2.0 by downloading the KUDZUKIAN app or by visiting your favorite podcast provider. Until next time, I'm Chairman Mark Billingsley, and you've been listening to the Chairman's Perspective powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. We'll see you next time.
The Chairman's Perspective Podcast. Executive producer, Shelby County Commission's Chairman, Mark Billingsley. Directed, produced, recorded, and distributed by KUDZUKIAN.